Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn about the nation building project in India, democracy and development. It is difficult to bring all the aspects of nation building in one go, but I'll try to put forth the meaning of nation, understanding nation building project in India, democracy and development. To start with the meaning of nation. Nation represents a spirit of homogeneity towards fellow inhabitants, sharing a common culture, ethnicity, race, religion and language or any of these. Nationalism meant differentiating between the nation and the state, and it was clear that no government could take upon itself the rights of the nation. Sovereignty resides with the nation and not with the government. People sharing a common race, language, religion, etc. will live together in a geographical area was considered as nation. The recent debates over nation add common consciousness as the important element of a nation. Nationality thus becomes a nation when there is a common agreement to live together in a state. Eric Hobsbawm mentions that the word nation has taken birth in 18th century. T.K. Oman says, nation is a territorial entity to which the nationals have an emotional attachment and in which they invest a moral meaning. It is a homeland, ancestral or adopted. National interest meant ensuring that every citizen lived with dignity, and this required both economic growth and social justice as fundamental to the establishment of a nation. Nationalism, as it evolved historically, was inclusive and due on the idea of unification of diverse groups to form a new community of citizens. Internal distinctions are part of the stratification of every society. Yet, as an entity, a society differentiates itself from others. Societies in the past were more often known by the characteristics of their elite. The culture of the dominant elite went into defining the civilization. For example, Indian civilization was located in the territory of British India. Its language was said to be Sanskrit and its religion Hindu. The history of British India by James Mill argued for three periods labeled in accordance with the religion of the rulers: Hindu civilization, Muslim civilization and the British period. Knowing about the background of the concept of nation with the spirit of inclusivity and social justice, let's move ahead to understanding nation building project in India. India, after attaining independence, despite its multi-ethnic character, engaged in a project of nation building. The Western notions of nation states, in which language, religion and political sovereignty having the boundaries had influenced the Indian concept of nation building. Fadnis and Ganguly opined that the approaches for the post-colonial nation building was focused on unified national identity based on common political values and citizenship. Ghosh and Chakrabarty pointed out that the survival of the nation state in India would depend on acceptance of the plurality of nationalities. The diversity in India represented through the homogeneous identities. Prior to colonial rule, there existed different nationality groups with different territorial and political loyalties. The colonial exploitation had placed the sense of bondage as being deprived and marginalized, resulting in a united fight against the colonial regime. The long history of being a cultural and social entity overcame the internal variations. As Eric Hobsbawm points out, that India as a polity that grew out of anti-colonial movement, it is in the wake of this movement that the Indian nationalist leadership woke up to the idea of one Indian nation by incorporating the various ethnic and linguistic entities within the colonial state. The Indian nationalist leadership tried to carry out this objective after independence in the name of the policy of nation building through its own project of cultural hegemony. The independent India faced challenges from various nationalities, from its regions, for a greater recognition of their identity within the new challenge to nation building exercise. The colonial state created territorial units for the administrative convenience. This process was advantageous for some linguistic groups for getting colonial education and other prospects. It resulted in demand for recognition of separate states based on linguistic identity. The political leaders initially were against this separation based on linguistic identity due to fear of birth of more homogeneous regional units, leading to weakening of the political imagination of the Indian nation. This process of demand for separate identity did not stop, and the States Reorganization Commission of 1956 recommended the reorganization of states on linguistic lines, and a number of new states were created, starting with the creation of a separate Andhra state from erstwhile Madras state. Similarly, separate states were created for speakers of Kannada, the present state of Karnataka, Malayalam, the present state of Kerala, Marathi, the present state of Maharashtra, and Gujarati, the present state of Gujarat. Later, the states of Punjab and Haryana were divided too, basing on religion as well as language. The concept of subnationalism with the cultural foundation was based on languages. It is not the same issue with the northeastern region, where the number of linguistic groups are multiple. Assam, being the largest linguist community in the region, with the language Assamese, incorporated many areas like the districts of Naga Hills from the state of Nagaland, Khasi and Jaintia Hills from the state of Meghalaya, Lushai Hills from the state of Mizoram. After the independence, these areas have been made into separate provinces, not on the basis of linguistic principle, but based on the religion, race, geographical and physical differences. The demands for separate states from different regions extended further to the creation of Jharkhand, bifurcating Bihar, Uttarakhand from the state of Uttar Pradesh, Chhattisgarh from the state of Madhya Pradesh in the year 2000. There has been demand for further division of Gorkha land from West Bengal, Bodo land from Assam. A recent and a different bifurcation occurred in 2014 with the separation of Telangana from the state of Andhra Pradesh. Some scholars argue that such demands for creation of new states have to be understood in the context of the decentralization of political life and economic change in India. The regional national assertion in India has not been confined only to the demand of creation of linguistic states or for fulfillment of other regional aspirations within Indian nation state. The country has had to face a lot of challenges of secessionism from its various regions. The Naga insurgency, Mizos, the Manipuri Meiteis, the tribal groups in Tripura and Assamese in the northeastern region, the Khalistani insurgency in the state of Punjab and the separatist movement in Kashmir has been a continuous source of challenge to the Indian nation state. The Indian state has been negotiating with the movements by various means like providing the constitutional special provisions due to its federal structure. Despite having the continuous challenges in protecting the spirit of unity among the heterogeneous groups, the Indian nation moves forward with the aspect of democracy and development with the spirit of inclusivity and social justice. Now let us understand the concepts of democracy and development. The institutional devices of the typical modern democracies were forged in republics or limited monarchs in the Western societies. So, these pre-democratic devices were turned against the older ruling class to create a more democratic constitution. The Indian constitution, with the experience under the different rulers and different religions, has envisaged the future and established a democratic platform so as to provide the opportunities to all the people equally, for example, universal suffrage. Democracy is the national ideology of India with democratic institutions like free and fair elections and freedom of expression and association. With high levels of poverty, illiteracy and cultural diversity, the survival of the democratic institutions is challenging. Despite many differences, the democratic institutions in India have proved resilient. The institutional criteria of democracy like political competition and electoral participation, India appears to be a success case. Elections have been largely frequent, free, fair and competitive with relatively high levels of voter turnout since independence. To observe the difference of Indian experience and the Western understanding, the expansion of democracy was gradually limited the power of the state in Western societies. In contrast to that, Indian democratic expansion has often meant an increase in the power of the state. The quasi-federal system of government distributes the unequal power between the center and the state. The subordinate groups often appeal to the state for protection and relief. The Indian federal system functions with the essential features of division of powers, supremacy of the constitution and having the written and rigid constitution with independent judiciary as well as bicameral legislature. Shortly after the independence, the hierarchical authority was slightly restricted in the social space, resulting in popular democratic demands. For example, land reform legislation, green revolution, anti-poverty programs, etc. The emphasis on group rights and group dignity may be justified on socio-political grounds and sometimes works against general economic development. James Manner argues that the formal institutions have not solely strengthened the democracy, but several informal institutions do play a crucial role, like cooperative societies, boards of private trusts, schools, colleges, temples, and organized interest like caste associations, unions of farmers, workers, and voluntary associations have made immense contributions, which stood as a bridge between the state and civil society. The local institutions like Panchayati Raj system have infused new resources into the political system through its governance process. The reservations for certain social groups and women particularly have given an opportunity to represent in the local bodies. The political parties and social movements became intertwined in the post-colonial world to eradicate inequality and injustice, and such a dialectical process strengthens democracy. The Indian national elite tried to ensure that post-independence constitution, which contains the full panoply of democratic institutions like elections, freedom of assembly and press, legal rights, parliament and legislatures, universal suffrage, etc., was based on the principle of equal rights. Surinder Jotka argues that caste soon became an important variable influencing the workings of the Indian political process as caste communities began determining electoral outcomes and functioning as pressure groups, affecting the government agenda at local, regional and national levels. Such a process had helped deepening democracy, which has become more inclusive of social categories and groups. The problems and the differences between the social groups based on caste and class was considered as a major challenge in obstructing the development process. Despite the constitutional provisions, atrocities on the vulnerable groups in the Indian society are not letting the country to march towards its inclusive growth. T.N. Madan and Ashish Nandi believe that the present crisis in India is due to the imposition of alien Western institutions by the arrogant and unbending elite, reflected in the conflict over secular state institutions. Advent of technology and inclusive participations at local level is demeaned by the domination of the elite culture. The developmental goals depends on various features like per capita income, which is the total income or national product of the country divided by its total population, indicates the average income. Development in India must focus on increasing the per capita income in order to ensure a better standard of living to one and all. Infant mortality rate or child mortality rate, defined as the number of deaths of infants out of every 1,000 before completing 1 year of age. A low figure for infant mortality rate is good for development in India because it indicates improved healthcare facilities. Sex ratio is another goal which indicates the development of the nation. This indicates the number of females per 1,000 males, and high ratio indicates societal progress in removing the gender gap. As per 2011 census, the figure was 940 females per 1,000 males. Likewise, the life expectancy and literacy rate. The higher the life expectancy value, the progress it indicates in health and nutrition facilities. As per 2011 census, the figure is 67 years for male and 72 years for females. Literacy rate is the most crucial indicators of development. It indicates the proportion of the population that is literate and able to read and write. The literacy rate in India as per 2011 census is of 74%, which indicates a lot more to be achievable. Infrastructure is another goal, explains about the progress of the nation. It refers to the roads, construction, bridges, airports, dams, power, telecommunication, etc. These are the building blocks of a country's path to development. The needs of the people extend beyond just income to other factors that are required for the healthy living. The Human Development Report of 2010 introduced this concept to rank countries on the basis of their per capita income, life expectancy and literacy rates. Currently, India ranks 131st out of 193 countries in Human Development Index and still have a long way to go in achieving development. Development is commonly used to denote material or economic advancement, working towards increasing the standard of living of a nation, in turn has a comparative meaning. The purpose of development is to reduce poverty, inequality and unemployment. Amartya Sen argues that development involves increasing freedom and broadening choices. Individuals have different ideas of what development means to them depending on the differences of lives and livelihood. At the time of independence, there was an interpretation that democracy in India would collapse eventually because of its diverse population in terms of caste, ethnicity, language and religion. In addition, a growing disparity of wealth, inequality, massive unemployment, multiple socio-economic problems, poverty, a rigid and hierarchical social structure and social misery were bound to undermine democratic institutions, developmental efforts and national unity. India is the most diverse country in the world in terms of ethnicity, language and religion. The country faced numerous problems after the independence, from establishing a national unity and consolidating the state, improving the economy and abolishing the mass poverty. The first task was to preserve, consolidate and strengthen India's unity to push forward the process of nation building as well as establish and protect the national state as an instrument of development and social transformation. This required the recognition and acceptance of the plurality by providing the space within the nation. Some guidelines for bringing efficiency in administration and to develop in order to decrease the gap between rich and poor. There are certain guidelines at the institutional level to realize the goals towards inclusive democracy. And these goals, with the directive principles of state policy of the Constitution of India, are Article 38 says that the state should secure a social order for the promotion of the welfare of the people. In the same way, Article 38(2) says that the state should take initiatives to reduce the inequalities of income, status, facilities and opportunities not only between individuals but also between different spatial and occupational groups. Article 39 explains that the state should secure the right to an adequate means of livelihood for all citizens, to protect health and facilitate the people to develop in a healthy manner with dignity. Article 41 mentions that state should enact legislation to secure the right to work, education and public assistance in case of unemployment, old age, sickness, disablement, maternity relief, etc. Article 46, it says that the state should promote with special care the educational and economic interests of vulnerable groups, especially Dalits, who are called as scheduled castes, and the tribes, the scheduled tribes as per the constitution. Article 47 explains that the state should raise the level of nutrition and standard of living of its people and improve public health. To conclude, it is important to note that Indian state has tried to address the question of diversity of the country in terms of various constitutional provisions for a number of groups and states. India adopted an inclusive approach to the future nation building in India, which was embedded in the phrase unity in diversity, emphasizing an underlying unity of people of India despite the differences in language, culture, history, etc. Indian constitution, through its constitutional guarantees, accommodated not only regional aspirations but also the aspirations of the minorities and disadvantaged groups. Although the Indian constitution followed the inclusivity, there remains certain criticism for establishing a culturally more uniform nation state. Works of Jefferlit, Hansen, Oman contents about the issues of nation building revolving around the persistent tension between Hindi-speaking twice-born Hindus, defining themselves as the norm-setters and value-givers. Sanjay Barua argues for a shift in the policy of the Indian state from nation building to that of federation building. This in turn would lead towards an alternative to nation building. Similar recommendations were made by the Sarkaria Commission in its report on the center-state relationship submitted to the Government of India. Dear students, we also discussed about the concepts of nation, nation building project, democracy and development. A nation is often confused with ethnic group and state, while the people sharing common myths, language, customs, history, religion, etc. may constitute an ethnic group. To become a nation, it must have an association with a homeland, real or imagined. The state is a legally constituted institution. The concept of nation state, based on the concept of one nation, one state, became predominant in the Western Europe and subsequently came to inform the nation building projects of the newly independent states, including India. Though India constituted by many groups and nationalities, the secular spirit with inclusivity through the constitutional provisions created a space for nation building. and critiques render on engaging in the cultural homogenization in establishing a culturally more uniform state. Thank you and hope you got to learn a bit today.